Good evening, guys. It is August 18th, 2023. On this video here, I want to talk to you about the differences between a budget vacuum cleaner and a high-end vacuum cleaner. Now, this is not necessarily a fair comparison. I know that, and it's not intended to be fair, if you want to call it that. I mean, some people gripe at me for that. However, there are a few things that I will mention about some of these vacuums. When it comes to vacuum cleaners, there's a whole wide range of vacuum cleaners. As far as pricing, and everything like that. Hold on, I'm trying to get in a position here. Okay. As far as pricing goes and quality, let me try and pan you down just a little bit more if I can. There we go. As far as pricing and quality goes, there's differences, massive differences. Now, unfortunately, just because it's more expensive doesn't mean that it's necessarily better. And just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's necessarily worse. Now, this is probably the widest gap that I have as far as machines. Now, I'm sure pretty much everyone knows at this point that Kirby's are very expensive machines. They are at least $1,000 in most cases. I would not pay $1,000 for one of these. I just wouldn't. I would pay no more than $700 to $800 for one. But that's just me. Now, when you're talking about the budget machines, this is probably the cheapest, or one of the cheapest budget machines that you can get. The Bissell PowerForce bagged upright. Now, what I want to talk to you about is you don't have to get a very high-end expensive machine. You can actually make a budget Bissell, for example, last a very long time. I've seen people get 10, 15 years out of these budget Bissell vacuum cleaners multiple times. It all comes down to maintenance, it all comes down to care, and it all comes down to what you actually want, what you can afford, and what you're willing to deal with. Now, one of the main reasons why Kirby's are so expensive is because of all of this. You have a wide variety of attachments, conversions, all kinds of different things that they can do. And they're literally made with almost indestructible materials. I mean, they can be, you know, beat up pretty good and still run for a long time. Whereas the cheaper ones, like your Bissells and stuff like that, most of the time that's not going to be the case. Most of the time they'll not really take breaks too gracefully. Although I have seen some cheaper vacuum cleaners that are pretty beat up and still managed to go, and it was wonderful. But what it comes down to is you want to make sure that you find a machine that you can get parts for. A machine where the basic design has been around for years and years and like literally decades. These Bissell Power Forces are basically that way in a lot of ways. There are some differences, but they're very similar, and they really haven't changed their design all that much. They have in some ways, and they've cheapened them in some ways, but they still use the same bags that they've been using for the last 20 years. They still use the same brush roller that they've been using for the last 20 years. And basically, there's just a lot of things. At the end of the day, no matter what you buy, in what category, you want to make sure that it is simple. Because if you keep it simple, you're not really going to have too much of a problem when it comes time to repair them, or if you need any parts or anything like that. Now, these Kirby's are basically the same way. They've been using the same basic design for the last 30 years, and some people may argue that that's a bad thing. I'm going to tell you, there's nothing bad in any way about having a design that stays the same. Honestly, no matter what machine it is, if you keep it basically the same design to where parts are widely available and they're easy to produce and it's all streamlined, then I don't see a reason to complain about that, because it keeps it simple. When you go to changing the design every couple of years, when you go to constantly changing stuff around on a machine, it just makes it more complicated. And for longevity, it's not really that great. Not to mention the cost savings, too, in the manufacturing, and the cost savings in general for the consumer. I look at that from that perspective, because when you go to making things more complicated than they need to be, it just doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, there's a lot of machines that, they could be like 5 or 10 years old, but like the parts are already obsolete and stuff because they're no longer making that model. That's extremely frustrating. I don't believe in that that mindset. Um, and so, you know, you want to make sure that you can find a machine that has been around for at least 20 years or so, or more, and you want to be able to find a machine that will be able to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, that's really all that you need. Is something to just keep the job, to get the job done. Now, this is why I highly recommend looking into commercial grade vacuum cleaners and vacuum cleaners that have had the same basic simple design for years and years and years. And a lot of people think that I like the Kirby because it's so high-end and fancy. Don't get me wrong, I love the Kirby for the reason that it's so versatile, that, you know, I just love the design of it. I like the way it's laid out. I really enjoy the Kirby for that reason. But that's not the main reason why I like it. The main reason why I like it is because it's a company that has true value, tried, true, and proven quality, reliability, and performance. And, you know, if anything goes wrong, now I will say that parts for Kirby's, for the most part, are fairly inexpensive. But if you need a bigger part, like say your outer bag gets torn and you need a new outer bag, that's gonna run you just shy of $100. And if you need a new transmission, that's like $130. If you need a new motor, that's going to be about $130 or so. So it can get expensive, but these Kirby's, if you take good care of them, they will last forever. I mean, they will last literally 20, 25, 30, 35 years easy. And if you treat them nicely, you're really not going to have any issues. I mean, and, you know, if a part does break, it's very simple to repair. Now, it's a little bit more involved than some others, but, you know, when you have a machine that has been designed, I mean, this is like working on a Volkswagen Beetle, pretty much. You know, when you need to work on these, and they're just so foolproof in their design. Now, they can be a little bit confusing if you've never been in one and stuff, so, you know, I would caution you on that. But once you get it down, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're really not that mechanically minded or not really up to that level, then getting a simpler machine that's kind of designed like this, doesn't have to be a Bissell like this, If you can find an old Panasonic, those are absolutely outstanding. If you can find, you know, old Eureka Victory machines, sanitary commercial grade machines that are designed, the design is based off of the Eureka Whirlwind. I believe it was the Eureka Whirlwind. I could be wrong, but basically, those designs have been around for a long, 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 long time. And, parts are everywhere for them. And so, this is basically why I talk so much about commercial grade machines. It's not just a durability standpoint, it's also a longevity standpoint, in that commercial grade machines, for the most part, there's occasionally some that are way overly complicated, and they really shouldn't be for commercial use. I mean, but commercial machines typically are designed to be serviced and be repaired, and parts are available, and most of the time parts are very inexpensive. If you just keep things running and in good condition, if something goes out, like a wheel, is falling apart, or a cord frays or shorts out, or, a cord hook breaks, whatever it is, it's so simple just to go online, get the part you need, and make sure that you can put it in and all that. But yes, it's that's basically why I talk about the higher end machines. Some of the higher end machines, though, I really don't think is worth it. I think some of the higher end machines can be way overly complicated, and this is just my opinion. I know some people have had great experiences with them. I personally haven't had any experiences with these, so I can't comment on this for sure, but this is just the way I see it. The tandem air machines, such as the Simplicity and the Riccar, Radiance and Brilliance, and kind of that level, though those do clean very well, I just see them being more complicated to actually get into and repair, and I'm not sure about parts availability in the long run. But I could be wrong. I don't know enough about them to know that for sure. But I personally am not the biggest fan of those. I just think that there's a lot more going on. It's not as streamlined and condensed into here's this, here's that, here's this, here's that, as the Kirby. Now, again, that's just my opinion. I have nothing against them. I just personally don't think they're the greatest investment when you're talking long term. That being said, there are plenty of them that I've seen that are running just fine, like zero issues, after like 10 years, 15 years. But then again, when something does go out, how much effort is that going to be? I just don't know. So there are some higher end machines that I think are a little bit too over the top. The Miele uprights that were made for a while, unfortunately, they're not making them anymore. But the Miele uprights seem to be a little bit overly complicated. That's just my opinion, once again. But, I'm kind of like leery about some of that. Like, if it's not basic and streamlined, basically, if anything is just gonna be like super flashy, just because, it's the thing to sell, like a Dyson or a Shark or something, I don't really see the point in it, because they're not necessarily marketing it towards longevity. They're just trying to sell it, and then they literally just don't give a flip about you after that. Now, I can't say that about Miele or any other company. I don't know for sure about that, but I know for a fact that Shark is definitely one of them. They literally just don't care. So that's basically what it boils down to. And yeah, just being able to find parts for a machine is absolutely important, and especially if you're investing a lot of money into a machine. I don't think it's worth spending $500, $600, $700, $800 on a machine that you can't get parts for, you can't repair. You can't, like, even $300 to $400. I mean, seriously. That's a lot of money to spend. And then when you can't get parts and aftermarket support, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So that's basically why I strive and kind of go more towards the higher grade machines. And again, not all of them. There are some that I'm not really a fan of, and that's just me. Some of you may think otherwise, and a lot of people think about like all of the cleaning capabilities and stuff, but at the end of the day, if you can't get parts and keep something running, you could have all the cleaning power in the world. You could have, everything you ever wanted. But if you can't get parts for it, if you can't repair it down the road, and you can't, keep it for, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, then what's the point of that? That's just my opinion. Bottom line is, if you keep something streamlined, simple, been using the same basic design, and I'm not talking about like, they shouldn't like make slight upgrades. I mean, Like, for example, Kirby and Bissell and a few other brands have kind of changed the, cosmetics of their machines over the years. But when you go to completely redesigning a machine every year, every few years, that's basically what Shark and Dyson does. Um, it just gets to be too complicated. And then on top of that, being able to continue to manufacture replacement parts for these units, you know, because every unit like has a different part, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. From a cost perspective for the manufacturer and from a cost perspective from the consumer. And also, it's going to give people a headache. Like, oh, will this fit my this or that? And I don't mind if there's like a couple models, like, you know, this one has like a 15-inch wide brush roll, and then this one has a 12-inch brush roll, or, something along those lines with some of them, like Bissell's and things like that. But when you go to like every single machine takes a completely different part, a completely different screw, a completely different brush roll, a completely different bag for every unit, completely different filter for every unit, completely different this for every unit, completely different hose connector for every unit. That gets way too complicated. And so when you keep things just simple and streamlined and the same basic design, they can just continue pumping out the parts and they'll be widely available for the consumer, and the consumer will be very appreciative because that's a machine that's going to last them a very, very long time. And this doesn't just go for Kirby, this goes for Sebo, this goes for Auric, you know, Electrolux, Sanitaire, Eureka Sanitaire, um, Bissell Power Forces, Hoover Wind Tunnels, like the basic Hoover Wind Tunnel bagged vacuum cleaners. For the most part, they've been pretty streamlined. Up until recently, they were pretty streamlined. That basic thing, it just keeps things simple, and it makes it so much nicer for the consumer, for the manufacturer, and the manufacturer's still making money, the consumer's still spending their money on these parts, they're having the option to repair, and in the long run, it's saving you money. Because I can tell you, replacing a vacuum cleaner all the time doesn't save you much more money. Some people think that it's always cheaper just to buy a new one. Not if you get a good one. Not if you get one that's commercial grade. Not if you get one that's streamlined and will last you a while. Now, it's going to cost you some money up front, don't get me wrong. It's going to be a splurge. But when you think about how many vacuum cleaners you would buy in your lifetime compared to buying one every 30 years, that cuts down, like, you would have already spent like several $1,000s, if not more, in buying disposable vacuum cleaners. So, again, whether it's a Kirby or a Sanitaire or a Sebo or something else, I really don't care. I don't care if it's a Kirby, I don't care what it is. If you keep it simple and you just keep it running for years to come, that's ultimately going to save you money in the long run. And I think you're going to be a lot happier with the product because it's not going to be super frustrating every time something breaks. And usually when machines are designed to be repaired, usually they're designed not to break as easily. Most of the time. Now, at the end of the day, the consumer still has to, be careful and take care of their machine. If you abuse your machine, you neglect it, you let it get dirty, full, nasty, and beat up, you're just asking for problems. So just keep it clean and maintained, because, the consumer is still responsible. Whether you buy, a very high-end machine or a low-end machine like that, you've got to stay on top of maintenance. You've got to take care of what you already own. And, in the long run, that's going to save you money. And doing maintenance, like keeping hair cleared out of the roller and keeping the bag changed and the belt changed, that's all preventative maintenance that, if you stay on top of it, it's going to save you money in the long run. And it's going to prevent stuff from going wrong. It's going to prevent stuff from breaking. It's going to prevent stuff from becoming a problem. So, yes. So, I hope you enjoyed this video where I discuss the pros and the cons of high-end and low-end vacuum cleaners. There's many benefits to investing in good vacuum cleaners. And I understand that not everybody can afford it. I have nothing against people buying cheaper machines at all. I don't think it's wrong to buy a cheaper machine, and I don't think it's wrong to buy an expensive machine. But as long as you can afford it, and as long as you understand to take care of it, regardless of what you've bought, whether it's a cheap machine or an expensive machine, understand that taking care of it is going to save you money in the long run. You already spent money on the machine. Doesn't matter if you spent, $60 or, $2,600 on a machine. It doesn't make any difference. You've still got to protect that investment and keep it running, because that is ultimately what's going to save you money. And buying machines that are simple, buying machines that you can get parts for, will ensure that. So anyway, I hope you learned something. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.